The boardroom shimmered with the quiet arrogance of money, lacquered mahogany glass walls and the heavy scent of power pretending to be civility. Alicia Grant stood at the far end of the table, arms folded, posture calm.
Sending the signal now.
She wore a navy suit, no jewelry, no entourage, just silence, and a gaze that could split glass. Across from her, Wei Lin leaned back in his chair, laughter already spilling from his mouth before the words formed. "She looks like the help," he said in Mandarin, voice casual, loud enough for the translators to hear. Mr. Zhao, the senior partner beside him, smiled thinly. "A waste of our time," he added, also in Mandarin. "Stupid black woman doesn't even understand us." Grace, Alicia's assistant, froze 2 seats away. Her hands tightened under the table. She understood every word. Alicia didn't move. Not yet. The projector hummed softly, showing the $700 million joint venture proposal, the reason for this meeting. Yet the numbers meant nothing. The room was no longer about business. It was about power dressed as protocol. Wei poured himself tea and smirked, glancing at Alicia. "Would you mind getting me some sugar?" he asked, and this time in English, feigning innocence. A few others chuckled. Alicia's eyes flicked to him once, unblinking. The kind of look that made silence suddenly feel like a verdict. Then, in a calm voice, "Before we continue," she said, turning slightly toward the camera crew streaming the meeting for record. "Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here." Now back to Alicia. The laughter in the room quieted just a little, confused, unsettled. We shrugged, whispering to Mr. Zhao again in Mandarin. "She doesn't even know we're calling her servant." Alicia's expression didn't change. But her voice, when it came, carried the kind of calm that made people forget to breathe. "Gentlemen," she said softly, "before we talk numbers, why, let's talk respect." Wei smirked. "Respect must be earned." Alicia tilted her head. "Then you're about to learn how expensive disrespect can be." The translator blinked, unsure whether to speak. The room shifted, just slightly. Outside, the glass reflected Alicia's image over the skyline of Shanghai. One woman, still as steel, framed against $1 billion view. And in that moment, nobody realized she understood every word they had said, because the real conversation was only beginning. The meeting resumed like nothing had happened, or at least that's what they wanted her to believe. Laughter thinned into whispers, papers shuffled, and the sharp click of pens filled the silence that prejudice left behind. Alicia didn't sit. She remained standing at the end of the table, hands resting lightly on the back of her chair, posture deliberate, not defiant, but sovereign. It wasn't the stance of someone seeking approval. It was the stance of someone who'd already bought the building. Grace typed quietly beside her, face still pale. Alicia could sense the unease vibrating off her assistant, the internal debate between professionalism and fury. She remembered that same feeling once, years ago, when she'd been an intern at a London firm and a client had mistaken her for catering staff. That memory never left. It became armor. Wei cleared his throat theatrically. "Perhaps we move on to the proposal," he said, pretending courtesy. "Time is valuable." Alicia smiled faintly. "Indeed. Especially yours." He missed the blade hidden in her tone. Mr. Zhao leaned forward, clasping his hands like a judge about to deliver a sentence. "We appreciate your company's effort," he said slowly, "but this partnership requires certain sophistication. You understand?" His accent was smooth. His condescension wasn't. The translator began to speak, but Alicia raised a hand gently. "No need," she said. "I understood every word." A pause rippled through the room, small but seismic. Wei looked up, eyebrows flicking. "Oh, you speak Mandarin?" Alicia's lips curved, not in amusement but in restraint. "I listen better than most," she replied. Grace stopped typing. The moment held. Mr. Zhao chuckled softly, mistaking her calm for submission. "Then you know what we mean when this deal must protect our image. Our investors expect professionalism." The word professionalism hung in the air like a knife disguised as etiquette. Alicia's expression didn't shift, but her eyes did, a slow, deliberate scan across every face at the table. She had been here before, boardrooms filled with men who equated politeness with superiority. They didn't want a partner. They wanted validation, Grace whispered, "Should I start the presentation?" Alicia nodded once. The projector flickered to life, casting her reflection onto the glass wall behind her. A doubled silhouette. The calm executive in front. The storm behind. "Our proposal," Alicia began, voice even, "isn't just numbers. It's infrastructure, logistics, community impact. What you're buying is not my signature. It's my standard." Her tone wasn't loud, but it carried. Every syllable landed like a gavel. Wei leaned to Mr. Zhao, muttering again in Mandarin, certain she wouldn't respond. So dramatic. Typical American performance. Grace's jaw tightened. Alicia didn't look his way. She didn't have to. She'd already decided how this meeting would end. For a long moment, the room felt suspended. Air thick, eyes cautious. Then Alicia looked directly at Wei. "Tell me," she said softly, "do you always insult your partners before they sign? Or am I just special?" Wei blinked, unsure if she'd understood his language or his arrogance. Mr. Zhao gave a restrained laugh. "It's business," he said. "Don't take it personal." Alicia's reply was colder than any threat. "Oh, Mr. Zhao?" she said, voice low, precise. "Business is personal, when you're the one writing the check." A hush settled over the boardroom. Grace stopped breathing for a heartbeat. The translator looked down. Somewhere beyond the glass, the Shanghai skyline shimmered, unaware that a storm had just been scheduled inside this room. And though they still thought they were running the meeting, Alicia Grant had already taken control. The silence after Alicia's last line stretched like wire. No one moved, but something invisible had shifted. Authority had changed seats. Wei forced a smile, that polite corporate smirk meant to hide discomfort. "Well," he said, "perhaps we continue in English. Simpler for everyone." Alicia nodded slightly. "Good idea. Let's simplify." Her voice was smooth, but Grace knew that tone. The calm before the audit. Mr. Zhao motioned toward the digital screen. Numbers and projections filled the wall, a cascade of blue and white graphs. "Your valuation," he said, "is optimistic. 700 million is excessive, especially for a firm of your size." He leaned back, satisfied with the soft sting. Alicia's gaze didn't waver. "Our valuation is data-driven. Unless, of course, you prefer guessing over metrics." Wei chuckled. "Confidence is admirable, Miss Grant, but in our culture, humility is also a virtue." Her response came razor clean. "Then you must be running low on it." A couple of junior associates sitting near the back hid their smiles. Zhao's expression froze, polite but brittle. The projector lights flickered as Grace changed slides. Behind Alicia, a video reel played of construction sites, schools, and clean energy hubs. All projects her company had financed across Africa and Southeast Asia. "We build where others hesitate," Alicia said. "And we do it profitably." Wei tapped his pen on the table, unimpressed. "Maybe you should focus on smaller deals. This one's too big for—" He stopped himself. But the pause finished the sentence. "For you." Alicia tilted her head, studying him the way an architect studies a cracked beam, noting where it will break first. "Too big?" she repeated softly. "The last time a man told me that, he ended up working for me." Laughter rippled from one of the younger investors. Joe shot him a look that killed it instantly. Alicia turned to Grace. "Pull up the partnership clause." Grace tapped a few keys. The screen zoomed in on a highlighted line. "All cultural exchange and communication standards must be reciprocal," Alicia read aloud. "Meaning, respect isn't optional." Wei exhaled sharply. "Are we really discussing respect in a billion-dollar deal?" Alicia's reply was gentle, almost pitying. "That's the only place it ever matters." Zhao's patience thinned. "Miss Grant, maybe this meeting isn't—" Alicia raised a hand. "No, please. Finish your sentence." He hesitated, then said, "Productive." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "That depends on what you consider production. Some people make profits. Others make excuses." The translator looked up, clearly sweating. He didn't know whether to translate or pray. Grace could feel it building. That quiet storm Alicia always carried into rooms like this. The kind that didn't shout or strike fast. It simply rose, inevitable and precise. We folded his arms. "You're a difficult woman." "No," Alicia said, stepping closer to the table. "I'm an efficient one." "There's a difference," Zhao's voice sharpened. "We have other partners waiting. More suitable ones." Alicia didn't blink. "Then perhaps you should go meet them," Wei scoffed. You're walking away from $700 million? She looked at him the way a queen looks at a pawn. You think that's the deal? She said quietly. The deal isn't money. It's access, and you just lost it. Grace's fingers froze over the keyboard. She knew that tone. The decision had been made. Alicia gathered her tablet, her notes untouched. I don't negotiate with disrespect, she said, turning toward the glass wall. The skyline behind her glowed like molten gold, a reflection of every wall she'd already torn down. As she reached the door, Wei muttered something in Mandarin under his breath, something small, vulgar, cowardly. Alicia paused, then replied, perfectly, fluently, and in the same language. Be careful with your words, she said. Her tone even, her pronunciation flawless. They reveal more than your contracts ever will. The room went dead still. Grace's mouth parted. Alicia didn't wait for their reaction. She simply walked out. And for the first time that morning, the men who'd called her servant realized they had just bowed to their master. The moment the glass doors closed behind Alicia, the room seemed to deflate. The investors exchanged awkward glances, pretending to reorganize their papers. But everyone knew what had just happened. Not a walkout, a verdict. Grace stayed seated, the only sound her keystrokes. Her heart was still hammering. She had seen Alicia in tense meetings before, but this was different. It wasn't confrontation, it was calibration. Alicia hadn't lost her temper. She had taken the temperature of the entire room and turned it cold. Wei exhaled loudly, breaking the silence. Unbelievable, he muttered. They send us a black woman to negotiate a $700 million deal and she walks out because of feelings. The translator hesitated, pretending not to understand. Grace did. Every word. Mr. Zhao leaned back, voice smooth as silk but eyes sharp. Arrogance disguised as confidence. Westerners confused the two. Wei snorted. Servant mindset. Too emotional for business. The insult hit Grace harder than expected. Though it wasn't aimed at her. She'd been raised in Singapore, studied finance in London, and worked for Alicia for 3 years. She'd seen racism dressed in 1,000 accents. But this, in Mandarin, spoken with a smile, burned deeper because of its elegance. The cruelty was refined. She turned toward the door Alicia had just exited. Something in her shifted. Maybe loyalty. Maybe pride. Maybe both. Wei clapped his hands once as if resetting the energy. All right, he said. We'll draft a revised offer without her involvement. The fund can acquire through a third party. Her company's too small to protest. Grace's fingers stilled. She looked up. Excuse me? Wei glanced at her, amused. You're her assistant, yes? You can inform your boss that her attitude just cost her a seat at this table. Grace's tone was calm, but her pulse betrayed her. And you can inform your boss, she said evenly, that this entire meeting was being recorded. Wei blinked. Zhao frowned. Recorded? Grace nodded, opening the tablet Alicia had left behind. Standard corporate protocol. All negotiations are logged for compliance. Audio, video, language metadata. Wei laughed, short and sharp. You think that scares us? Grace didn't flinch. It should, her voice surprised even her. The same softness that usually made her fade into the background now carried an edge. Alicia had taught her that, not through words, but through stillness. Mr. Zhao cleared his throat. You're bold for an assistant. Grace met his gaze. No, sir. Just trained. For a long moment, Zhao studied her. The quiet defiance, the steadiness that reminded him uncomfortably of Alicia. Then he smirked. You think you're protected by her reputation? Grace closed the tablet and stood. No. By her results. As she turned to leave, Zhao said something in Mandarin. A quiet thread about visas and work permits. Grace stopped, pivoted, and replied flawlessly in the same language. I'm Singaporean, not naive. Try again. The shock on their faces almost made her smile. She'd learned more from Alicia than finance. She'd learned timing. The room's tension was now palpable. The translator avoided eye contact. A junior associate pretended to check his watch, clearly wishing to vanish. Grace gathered her documents and walked toward the door. Her reflection passed across the polished table, calm, composed, unbothered. But as she reached the handle, she said without turning back, You should have asked who she really was before you called her servant. She stepped out. In the corridor, The air felt lighter, cleaner, like escaping a storm that hadn't realized it had already ended. Down the hall, Alicia was waiting by the elevator, phone in hand. Grace approached, unsure whether to speak first. Alicia looked up, eyes soft but unreadable. "Did you stay long enough?" she asked. Grace nodded. "Long enough to hear what they really think." Alicia's lips curved, faint but fierce. "Good," she said. "Now they'll learn what we really do." The elevator chimed open, and the two women stepped inside, the servant and the student, walking toward a justice that didn't need noise, only precision. The elevator doors closed, sealing them inside a mirror of brushed steel and quiet vengeance. Grace stood to one side, still catching her breath. Alicia didn't look angry. She looked measured, like she'd just completed an equation. "You knew they'd test you," Grace said softly. Alicia's reflection met her eyes in the mirror. "They always do." "Why not tell them you spoke Mandarin earlier?" Alicia smiled, faint and precise. "Because you don't reveal fluency to people still learning respect." The elevator glided down. Each floor ticked like a countdown. When the doors opened at the ground lobby, Alicia stepped into the marble hall, polished, echoing, crowded with glass and whispers. Every step she took was deliberate, the kind that turned stillness into authority. Her phone buzzed once. Carla Bennett's voice came through, crisp, American, efficient. "Ma'am, I've been monitoring the call. Do we proceed with Protocol 7? "Not yet," Alicia said. "Let's give them a chance to choose integrity over ego." "And if they don't?" Alicia's lips barely moved. "They won't." Grace followed close, the assistant who suddenly felt like an apprentice. She'd seen Alicia pull off corporate miracles before, acquisitions, turnarounds, boardroom rescues. But this felt different. This wasn't strategy. It was something colder. Justice, maybe. They stepped out onto the street. The city was loud, impatient, unaware that a global deal had just cracked in silence. A driver opened the door to a black sedan. Alicia slid inside, set her tablet on her lap, and began typing without looking up. Grace watched the screen fill with instructions. Initiate preliminary withdrawal of funding. Revoke partnership access. Audit translation feed logs. Cross-check investor remarks. Is that... Grace started. Documentation, Alicia said. They like procedure? Let's give them procedure. Carla's voice came through the car's speaker again. All right. Protocol 7 activated on standby. Media alert suppressed. Would you like me to notify the ethics board? Not yet. We'll let the system watch before it speaks. Grace frowned. System? Alicia finally looked at her. Every company I build has a spine. Ethics AI that monitors negotiation behavior. They've just been recorded calling me servant. They don't know. They will. The car cut through traffic, neon lights sliding across Alicia's face like moving verdicts. You ever notice, she said quietly, how people assume humiliation is a weakness? Grace shook her head. They think silence means surrender. Alicia smiled. It doesn't, it means calculation. She tapped the screen again. Her email drafted itself into a crisp, 3-line message addressed to the Global Board of the Investment Fund. Subject, immediate review of cultural compliance, Shanghai office. Body language review attached. Recommend leadership audit within 24 hours. Grace read over her shoulder. You're going after their entire branch. No, Alicia said. I'm reminding them who their partner is. Her phone chimed again. Carla. We've also traced one of the investors. Weilin. He's been under compliance scrutiny before, internal bias complaint. Unreported. Perfect, Alicia replied. Link it to today's feed quietly. Grace exhaled halfway between awe and fear. You're not fighting them, are you? You're teaching them. Alicia turned, her expression unflinching. Grace, there's no difference. The sedan stopped at the base of the Grand Ascend Tower, her company's Shanghai headquarters, all glass and silver, rising like judgment itself. As they stepped out, Grace asked the question she'd been holding. So what happens now? Alicia smoothed her jacket. Now, she said, we let them think they still have options. She walked into the tower without looking back. Behind her, the city pulsed with indifferent life. But somewhere 30 floors above, an automated system had already begun sending polite but devastating notifications to the men who'd mistaken power for privilege. And for the first time that day, Alicia Grant allowed herself the smallest smile. They had called her servant, Soon they would serve her silence. The next morning, the Horizon Tower boardroom didn't hum with the usual self-importance. It buzzed, frenetic, nervous, uncertain. The investors had gathered again, summoned by a terse internal memo from their headquarters. Urgent. Cultural Conduct Review. Wei paced beside the window, phone in hand, voice sharp in Mandarin. How could they have gotten this so fast? We never sent recordings. Zhao sat motionless, scrolling through his tablet. His calm was gone, replaced by something heavier. Realization. Don't you see? He said quietly. She didn't need to send it. She owns the pipeline. Grace entered with a silent authority that startled them. No entourage, no translator, just a single black folder tucked under her arm. She didn't look like an assistant anymore. She looked like the messenger of consequences. Zhao frowned. Where is Miss Grant? Grace placed the folder on the table. She's where she always is. Ahead of you. Wei gave a humorless laugh. So now the help delivers the threats? Wei gave a humorless laugh. So now the help delivers the threats? Grace met his gaze steady. No, the documentation. She opened the folder, revealing transcripts, every insult, every word from yesterday's meeting, precisely time-stamped and translated. The Mandarin sentences glared back at them in black ink. This can't be legal, Wei snapped. It's not surveillance, Grace said evenly. It's record-keeping. You agreed to it when you signed the pre-contract protocol. Mr. Zhao's face drained of color. He remembered. The clause had been there, standard compliance oversight which none of them had ever bothered to read. Grace continued, voice calm, but sharp as glass. Headquarters requested a response within 24 hours. You can either issue a formal apology and continue discussions, she closed the folder, or we can proceed to contract termination. Wei's jaw tightened. You're bluffing. Grace's phone buzzed. She turned the screen so they could read it. From Alicia Grant, subject, Protocol 7 complete, 0900 GMT execution. Zhao stood abruptly. Protocol 7? Grace nodded. Asset withdrawal, press audit, partnership freeze. She let the words hang there, deliberate, surgical. That's impossible, Wei muttered. She can, Grace interrupted. Because you gave her access to your systems when you asked for our logistics model. She built the infrastructure you're standing on. Silence. Thick, cold, choking. Zhao sank back into his chair, the weight of arrogance turning into gravity. We misread her. You mistook dignity for weakness, Grace said. She noticed. Her phone buzzed again. This time, Carla's voice came through the speaker, crisp and professional. Miss Zhang, confirmation from HQ. Investor network suspended. All transactions flagged for ethics audit. Grace nodded. Copy that. Wei slammed his palm on the table. This is extortion! Grace didn't flinch. No, this is accountability. For a moment, no one spoke. The air itself seemed to listen. Outside the window, the skyline glared under morning light, an empire of glass reflecting back their mistakes. Wei turned away from it, muttering in disbelief. Zhao watched Grace, studying her posture, her composure. Finally, he said, She taught you well. Grace's expression didn't soften. She taught me to listen and to remember who signs the checks. She collected the folder, closed it neatly, and walked to the door. Before leaving, she paused. Miss Grant asked me to deliver one message. She turned back, eyes level. She said, Respect is cheaper than recovery. Then she left, her heels echoing against marble. When the door clicked shut, the silence that followed wasn't corporate anymore. It was personal. Wei slumped into his chair, staring at the Shanghai skyline like it had turned into a mirror. Servant, he whispered bitterly. Zhao corrected him, voice low. No way. That woman served us justice. Somewhere above them, in an office built from her own blueprint, Alicia Grant looked down at the same skyline. Her reflection met the cities in the glass, a quiet, flawless symmetry. And for the first time in years, she allowed herself to exhale. The lesson was in motion. The reckoning had begun. By noon, the city's financial feeds were already pulsing with whispers. Something about a suspended contract. Something about an ethics review involving 2 major investors from the Lin Zhao Group. No names yet, but every broker in Shanghai felt the tremor. Deals don't vanish quietly at that scale. They leave a crater. Inside the same boardroom where the insult had begun, chaos had replaced confidence. Wei was pacing again, jacket off, sleeves rolled high, his voice rising. Fix it. Call her, apologize, whatever it takes. The staff avoided his eyes. Zhao sat by the window, motionless, watching the reflection of cranes building towers they no longer controlled. You think an apology will fix this? Zhao finally said, his tone stripped of ego. She's not punishing us for the words, Wei. She's punishing us for the assumption. Wei threw a stack of documents onto the table. She's making it personal. Zhao turned to him. It was personal the moment you called her servant. The door opened. Grace stepped in again, this time with 2 compliance officers behind her. One from Alicia's firm, another from the global board of the Lin Zhao group. Their presence changed the air instantly. Gentlemen, Grace said, we'll be brief. The officers took seats, placing tablets on the table. One of them, a British auditor named Collins, spoke first. Per contractual clause 9.4, repeated cultural violations during negotiations constitute grounds for termination. We've reviewed the recordings. He glanced toward Grace, then back to the men. It's conclusive. Wei's voice cracked. This is ridiculous. Those were private comments. Collins didn't flinch. You said them in a recorded corporate environment. That's not private. That's procedural suicide. Grace slid an envelope across the table. This is the official withdrawal notice. Effective immediately, all funding access is revoked. Miss Grant has declined any future partnership considerations. Wei's face went red. Declined? She's walking away from $700 million. Grace met his fury with something calmer than pity. Correction, she's walking above it. Zhao exhaled slowly, accepting what Wei still couldn't. What does she gain by this? Grace's eyes softened for a moment. Not gain legacy, silence spread. The auditors signed their digital pads. A small red seal appeared on the shared display. Contract terminated. 12:04 p.m. local time. Zhao leaned back, rubbing his temples. All this because of a few careless words. Grace shook her head. Words build walls, Mr. Zhao. Sometimes breaking them costs everything. Her phone buzzed again. Alicia's name on the screen. Grace stepped aside, answered quietly. It's done, she said. Good, Alicia's voice replied. Has he understood yet? Grace glanced at Zhao. One of them has. The other's still fighting gravity. Let him, Alicia said. Some lessons need the fall. When she ended the call, Wei had collapsed into his chair, muttering curses under his breath. His defiance had shrunk into disbelief. Grace gathered her folder, preparing to leave. Miss Grant asked me to tell you one last thing, she said quietly. When she walked out yesterday, she didn't end a deal. She ended a pattern. Zhao looked up, weary but lucid. Tell her she succeeded. Grace nodded once and left. Through the glass, the skyline shimmered. Same towers, same sunlight, but now it looked different, like the city itself had learned shame. Back in her office 30 floors above, Alicia stood before the window, watching the reflection of cranes move like clock hands against the horizon. Carla entered holding a tablet. It's official, she said. The market pulled their listings. Their shares are down 11% in 1 hour. Alicia's gaze didn't leave the skyline. That's not loss, she said softly. That's lesson. Carla hesitated. Should we respond publicly? Alicia finally turned, eyes clear as glass. No. Let the silence speak. It's fluent enough. The screen beside her flickered, financial data, collapsing trends, the quiet rhythm of consequence. And across every mirrored tower in the district, her reflection moved, calm, steady, unbent. The woman they once called servant, now teaching an empire the cost of arrogance. By dusk, headlines had spread across every financial outlet in Asia. Unprecedented contract termination in Shanghai. Black CEO pulls out of 700, deal citing ethics clause. The words circulated like electricity, polite, factual, incomplete. Nobody knew the full story yet, but everyone could feel its pulse. Inside Alicia's penthouse office, the city glowed beneath her like molten circuitry. Screens along the glass wall displayed real-time data. Stocks, statements, articles. None of them rattled her. She'd seen markets rise and fall. She built her legacy between those beats. Carla entered quietly, placing a folder on her desk. Internal review is done, she said. They're officially blacklisted for cultural misconduct. The footage from the meeting, It's viral on private channels. Alicia didn't look up. Private now. Public later. Grace stood near the window, still processing the magnitude of what had unfolded. You knew this would happen, she said. Alicia finally turned. I knew they'd try to make me small. People always test the limits of what they think belongs to them. Grace's voice lowered. And you let them? I wanted the world to see the test, Alicia replied. Otherwise, they'd think it's fiction. The room was quiet except for the faint hum of the city, an empire breathing. Alicia stepped toward the window, her reflection merging with the skyline. When I was 25, she said softly, I built my first logistics hub in Nairobi. Investors laughed, said a black woman in trade was charity, not business. One man told me I should start with customer service. I thanked him. She turned slightly, eyes narrowing. Then I bought his company a year later. Grace's smile was small but fierce. You turned humiliation into investment. Alicia nodded. Pain is the most undervalued currency. Spend it right, it compounds. Carla tapped her tablet. Press is asking for a statement. Everyone wants to know what really happened. Alicia considered that for a long moment. Tell them nothing yet. Let the silence ripen. It teaches longer than words. Outside, the light faded into a deep blue that reflected across her desk like water. Grace watched her boss, calm, centered, but carrying a weight that came from too many similar rooms, too many polite insults dressed as professionalism. Do you ever get tired? Grace asked quietly. Alicia's laugh was low, dry. Every day. But then I remember. Tired people built every wall I had to climb. I won't give them the satisfaction of seeing me rest. Carla's phone buzzed again. She glanced at it, then frowned. Ma'am, Global Headquarters just released an internal update. It names you as the sole beneficiary of the suspended assets, roughly $120 million in liquid holdings. Apparently, the clause triggered automatic reallocation after misconduct termination. Grace blinked. They just handed it over? Alicia shrugged lightly. Not handed, forfeited. The three women exchanged a look, disbelief, then quiet awe. Alicia turned away from the window and sat at her desk. Send a note to compliance, she said. Half goes into the Global Equity Fund, the other half. She paused. Scholarships for women in trade. Label it the servant grant. Grace stared at her. You're naming it after what they called me, Alicia finished. Let them build futures under that name. It'll remind the next generation what happens when you underestimate service. Carla exhaled slowly. You just turned an insult into an institution. No, Alicia said softly. Into inheritance. Outside, thunder rolled faintly above the skyline. Rain began tracing long, silver lines down the glass, each drop reflecting the city's lights like tiny apologies. Grace watched Alicia sign the final authorization. Her signature was clean, precise, unwavering, the mark of someone who no longer fought for space. But to find it, somewhere across the world, the men who'd mocked her now stared at their frozen accounts, realizing too late that power doesn't raise its voice or it recalculates. And in that quiet, as the rain fell over Shanghai, Alicia Grant became what she'd always been destined to be. Not a servant, not a symbol, but the storm that teaches silence its cost. By the next sunrise, the story had left the business section and crossed into the world's front pages. CNN, BBC, Cation, Bloomberg, all running the same headline in different languages. Black CEO walks away from $700 million deal. Investors under ethics investigation. But the real revelation hadn't surfaced yet. Not until a journalist in New York traced the corporate trail. Within hours, it broke. Alicia Grant isn't just the CEO who canceled the deal. She's the majority shareholder of Lin Zhao's parent fund. The news hit like a detonation. Screens lit up across continents. Traders froze mid-call. Investors scrambled. Hashtags erupted. Her servant no more. Alicia Grant effect. In the corner office of Horizon Tower, Mr. Zhao watched the live stream replay on mute, Alicia's calm face beside the headline. His own reflection trembled in the glass. She owned us, he whispered. Wei didn't answer. He was too busy fielding calls from panic-stricken partners. His arrogance had curdled into disbelief. That can't be true, he muttered. She can't, Zhao cut him off. She did, and she warned us. Down below, traffic choked the avenues, a rush hour of consequence. Inside Alicia's headquarters, the air was steady. No celebration, just precision. Grace scrolled through the breaking coverage. "They finally know," she said. Alicia didn't look up from her screen. "They always find out. The timing just determines who survives the fallout." "You really owned their fund?" Alicia smiled faintly. "Since 2019. Quietly. I believed in their infrastructure model. I didn't believe in their ethics." Carla entered holding 2 phones, both vibrating with non-stop calls. Every outlet wants a statement. "They're asking if you planned this from the start." Alicia looked toward the rain-smeared skyline. "I didn't plan disrespect. They brought that themselves." "Then what do we tell them?" Carla asked. Alicia turned slowly, eyes calm but razor clear. "Tell them it was never revenge. It was review." Grace exhaled a laugh that was half awe, half disbelief. "You're the parent investor. That means yesterday's audit came from your own board." "Exactly," Alicia said. "The moment they violated Clause 9, I didn't need to retaliate. I just let the system I built do its job." Carla checked her watch. "They've gone into emergency restructuring. Their market value's down another 18%. Alicia nodded once. "Then maybe they'll understand that respect isn't charity. It's currency." She turned back to the window. The skyline glimmered through fading rain, each tower reflecting the next like mirrors in an infinite hall. Power seeing itself, learning humility the hard way. "When you own the system," Alicia murmured, "you don't need to shout to be heard." Grace hesitated before asking, "Why didn't you ever tell them who you were?" Alicia's voice softened. "Because people reveal themselves faster when they think you're beneath them. I just prefer truth without makeup." The room fell silent, heavy and reverent. Carla's phone buzzed again. "Ma'am, the Global Women in Business Council just requested an interview. They want to feature you for next month's cover story." "Decline," Alicia said. "Send them the fund's new equity program instead." "The story isn't me. It's the pattern." Grace frowned slightly. "You could be celebrated for this." "I don't need celebration," Alicia replied. "I need change." Outside, dawn split the clouds, painting streaks of gold across the skyline, a quiet crown over a city that had once underestimated her. Zhao watched that same sunrise from his office across town. For the first time, he didn't see glass and concrete. He saw reflection, his, hers, the lesson etched into every window. She never raised her voice, he said softly. Wei didn't answer. His phone buzzed again, unanswered. Zhao turned away from the window, the truth landing like gravity. Because she didn't need to. The world was already listening. And miles away in her office high above the city, Alicia Grant closed her laptop and whispered into the morning light. "They called me servant. They forgot who built the house." By the end of the week, the empire they'd mocked her from had begun to crack. Not loudly, not all at once, but like glass under pressure. Every corner of the Lin Zhao group was bleeding credibility. Emails leaked. Clients withdrew. Partner firms cited ethical incompatibility. On social media, people weren't arguing about the deal anymore. They were dissecting the arrogance that birthed it. Clips from the meeting, Alicia's calm stare, Wei's laughter, Zhao's stupid black woman remark, spread faster than any press statement. Hashtags now carried faces. Servant no more. The Grant lesson in a luxury apartment overlooking the Bund. Wei Lin stared at the television as a news anchor recited his name with surgical precision. Investor Wei Lin has been placed under internal review following allegations of discriminatory conduct. He turned the volume down, gripping the remote so tightly it creaked. His phone was filled with unanswered calls from PR firms, crisis consultants, lawyers. None could repair what had already gone viral. Mr. Zhao sat across from him, older, quieter. His authority evaporated into resignation. "You should call her," Zhao said. Wei snapped. "For what?" "To apologize. She destroyed me." Zhao's tone was low, almost reverent. "No, she revealed you." "There's a difference." Across town, in a very different atmosphere, Alicia Grant stood in front of a packed auditorium. The Global Equity Forum had invited her to speak. Last minute standing ovation before she'd even begun. She looked out at hundreds of faces, CEOs, analysts, young entrepreneurs, mostly women, mostly watching her like gravity itself had taken human form. "They called me servant," she began. The crowd fell silent. They believed power belonged to those who spoke the loudest. But true power doesn't shout, it documents. Her voice stayed measured, deliberate. The room leaned forward as she continued. When someone shows you their prejudice, don't fight it, record it. Systems change when truth becomes data. The applause was quiet at first, then thunderous. Cameras flashed, but Alicia didn't linger in the spotlight. This wasn't revenge. It was report. Back in Shanghai, Zhao turned off the TV and spoke almost to himself. She warned us. Every word she said was a test. We failed. Wei didn't respond. He was staring at his phone, at the statement his PR team had drafted. An apology that sounded like a negotiation. He deleted it. For the first time, he looked defeated, not angry. She's untouchable now, he said. No, Zhao replied. She's unbothered. Meanwhile, at Alicia's headquarters, Grace entered her office holding a tablet. News just broke. Their entire fund has been delisted from 3 exchanges. Investors are pulling out worldwide. Alicia nodded once. That's gravity. It doesn't need help, just time. Grace looked at her, almost studying her calm. You never raised your voice. Not once. I didn't need to, Alicia said. Noise doesn't build systems. Consistency does. She walked to the window again, her reflection merging with the city lights. Shanghai at dusk. Electric, humbled. Behind her, Carla joined quietly. The world's calling you the woman who ended an empire, Carla said. Alicia smiled slightly. No, I ended a habit. Grace set the tablet down. People are asking for a quote, something final. Alicia thought for a long moment. Then she said softly, write this. I didn't cancel a contract. I canceled permission, the permission to mistake my silence for submission. Grace nodded slowly, eyes bright. That's going to be everywhere. Good, Alicia said. Let it echo. Outside, traffic streamed beneath the tower like veins of light, a living city, recalibrating itself around a new equilibrium. Across the skyline, the logos of fallen investors dimmed one by one, like fading stars, and in that silence, vast, unhurried, absolute, Alicia Grant stood by the glass, the reflection of her calm spreading across the city that once underestimated her. Power hadn't shouted, it had simply waited, and when it finally spoke, the whole world listened. The week after the collapse felt like a global reckoning. Every news outlet replayed the same loop. Alicia Grant walking calmly out of the boardroom, the insult subtitled beneath, then the silence that followed. That impossible weaponized silence. It wasn't outrage that destroyed Lin Zhao Group. It was stillness sharpened into strategy. Inside her office, dawn cut through the floor-to-ceiling windows, turning the skyline gold. Carla entered with 2 mugs of coffee, her expression caught between awe and exhaustion. You know, ma'am, she said quietly, I've never seen someone win like this without saying a single threat. Alicia smiled faintly. That's because threats are loud. Results echo. Grace joined them moments later, tablet in hand. The final audit came through, she said. Every major partner has voted to dissolve Lin Zhao Group's Asia board. The assets you redirected, they're now under your global equity fund. Alicia took the tablet, scanned the data once, and placed it on the desk. Close it out quietly. No celebration, no statement. You don't want the credit? Grace asked. I don't need it, Alicia replied. Let the results speak their native language, impact. Outside, the skyline shimmered like a confession. The storm was over, but its echo remained. Carla hesitated before asking, will you ever meet them again? Alicia turned from the window. Maybe. The world is round, Carla. Lessons travel. In another part of the city, Mr. Zhao stood before a nearly empty boardroom. His staff had been dismissed. Screens blank, phone silent. He stared at the empty seats and said to no one in particular, we thought we were negotiating numbers. She was teaching consequences. He poured himself tea but couldn't drink it. Even the steam rose like accusation. Across the world, Alicia's name began to reshape narratives in business schools, leadership seminars, and op-eds titled The Cost of Underestimation. The footage from the meeting, her poised reaction to humiliation, became a case study. Not a scandal, but a syllabus. Grace scrolled through her phone, reading comments from women everywhere. This is the first time I've seen calm used as power. She didn't destroy them. She educated them. Servant? No, standard. Alicia listened silently as Grace read. Then she said, save those. Turn them into scholarships, Grace blinked. What do you mean? Every comment from a woman who recognized herself in that story, and that's a name. That's a seed. Fund it, Carla smiled. You're turning applause into infrastructure. Exactly, Alicia said. That's how you make justice sustainable. She sat down at her desk, pulled out a thin leather notebook, and wrote a single sentence across the top page. Dignity is not defended. It's demonstrated. Grace watched her write, the sound of pen against paper cutting through the quiet like a closing door. In the distance, thunder rumbled again, faint, echoing, like the memory of the first insult that started it all. Alicia looked up. Funny thing about storms, she said softly. They sound destructive, but sometimes they just clean the air. Carla gathered her notes. And what happens now? Alicia closed the notebook. Now? We build something new where arrogance used to stand. Down below, the city began to stir. Unaware that the woman they once mistook for a servant had just rewritten its hierarchy. For the first time in weeks, Alicia allowed herself to breathe long and steady. The war was over, the lesson complete. But as she turned toward the window, her reflection doubled again. The woman she'd been, the woman they'd forced her to become. She whispered to the glass, to herself, to every young girl who'd ever been underestimated. Silence isn't submission, it's strategy, and it always collects. The morning light caught her face, and for a moment she didn't look victorious. She looked eternal, the living proof that power, when patient, always speaks last. A month later, Shanghai had moved on, at least on the surface. The markets had stabilized, the headlines had cooled, and yet something fundamental in the city's pulse had changed. Where there had once been unspoken hierarchies, now there were questions, conversations, quiet reckonings. In a newly built auditorium on the riverfront, the lights dimmed over a banner that read, The Servant Grant Foundation Launch Ceremony. Cameras flashed. Journalists whispered. And at the center of it all, Alicia Grant stood behind a simple black podium, wearing the same navy suit she'd worn the day they called her servant. This time, the word was engraved behind her in silver, not as an insult, but as an inheritance. Grace stood beside her, holding a folder of documents, the first round of scholarships for women in trade, logistics, and tech leadership. Dozens of young faces filled the first rows. Engineers, economists, students who'd followed her story online. They looked at her not as a headline, but as a blueprint. Alicia began without introduction. They called me servant, she said, and the room went utterly still. I didn't correct them. Because sometimes correction isn't education. Experience is. She paused, scanning the audience. What happened in that room wasn't about one woman. It was about every person who's ever had to prove intelligence before being allowed respect. Her voice didn't rise. It deepened. Steady, resonant, the sound of someone who no longer needed volume to command attention. When they spoke, they revealed their limits. When I stayed silent, I met them. The crowd listened, some in awe, some in tears. Today, that silence funds opportunity. The same insult that tried to reduce me will now raise others. That's how justice evolves, not by rage, but by redirection. Applause swelled, not thunderous, but sustained, like a heartbeat echoing in unity. Backstage, Grace watched through the curtain, remembering the first day she'd met Alicia, how she'd been nervous, timid, unsure of her place in a world that measured worth by skin, accent, and gender. Now she was the executive director of a global fund. Alicia hadn't just changed rooms. She'd changed trajectories. After the ceremony, as cameras packed up and guests filtered out, Alicia stood by the glass wall overlooking the river. The city lights shimmered on the water like floating embers. Grace joined her quietly. You did it, Grace said. Alicia smiled. No, we did. Do you ever think about them? Wait, so... Alicia's gaze didn't waver. Sometimes. But not with anger. The thing about ignorance is, it educates itself eventually. They stood there in silence, the kind that carried no tension now, only peace. A knock on the door broke the quiet. A young journalist entered hesitantly, clutching a notebook. Miss Grant, she said. One question for the record. If you could say one thing to the people who doubted you that day, what would it be? Alicia turned, thoughtful, then smiled. Slow, certain. I'd thank them, she said. Because without disbelief, belief means nothing. And without disrespect, dignity never gets its stage. The journalist nodded, stunned. Alicia extended a hand, guiding her toward the exit. Now go write something honest, she said gently. Not about what I did, Rare, but why you thought I couldn't. When the door closed again, Grace laughed softly. You always know how to end a story. Alicia looked back at the glowing skyline. That's because I don't end them. I leave them open, for the next woman to walk in. The city lights flickered across her face, a mosaic of fire and reflection. The river carried their glow into the horizon on her forward, relentless, alive, and as the night settled over Shanghai, the words on the silver banner caught the final light. Servant, the one who leads by lifting. Alicia Grant exhaled, serene, untouchable. The woman they once mistook for help had become history's quiet architect. No fury, no revenge, just justice, elegantly executed, and silence once again doing all the talking.